The Interstellar Research Consortium's emergency chamber smelled of 17 different atmospheric blends, a headache-inducing cocktail that only happened when species from across the known galaxy crammed themselves into one room under extreme pressure. Professor Kale Veyron stood at the center of it all, his three pale blue eyes cycling through visible frustration. His elongated Selvari fingers drummed against the holographic display table, each tap sending ripples of light across the projection of the data they'd been staring at for 14 hours, 22 minutes, and he checked his internal chronometer. 9 seconds. 14 hours. 6 species. 43 of the galaxy's finest scientific minds. The best simulation arrays that 12 trillion credits could build. And the damn signal wouldn't resolve. "Run it again," said Dr. Wraith, the Keth representative, her bioluminescent gilfrons flaring orange with exhaustion. "Perhaps with the atmospheric variable adjusted by 0.03. "We have adjusted it 47 times, snapped Commodore Zess of the Vorith, his chitinous mandibles clicking together. "The adjustment does nothing. The pattern refuses to stabilize. Whatever is generating that signal from the planet's surface is operating on a logic our models cannot replicate." The planet in question, designated KX7 Primaris in the consortium's dry catalog, was what the galactic community politely called a hazard class Omega world. Tectonic instability. Electromagnetic chaos. A biosphere so aggressively evolved that even the fungi were predatory. Atmospheric acid pockets. Geomagnetic storms that could fry unshielded electronics in seconds. The kind of planet that no sane species would ever voluntarily go near. Except, of course, for one. "The human specialist is here," said a soft voice from the doorway. Every head in the room turned. Mara Ellison walked in like she hadn't just traveled 40 hours through relay jumps and been dragged out of what she'd later describe as a perfectly good nap. She was compact, dark-haired, with the kind of relaxed posture that only came from either deep confidence or chronic danger exposure. Her field jacket had a scorch mark on the left shoulder that she clearly hadn't bothered to repair. A battered datapad was tucked under one arm. She had a cup of something hot in her hand, actual brewed coffee, which she had apparently found in the station's galley at 0300 station time. She looked at the room full of exhausted alien scientists. She looked at the holographic display. She took a sip of her coffee. "So," she said pleasantly. "What are we looking at?" Professor Veyron straightened to his full height, impressive for a Selvari, nearly 2.5 meters. "Dr. Ellison. Thank you for responding to the emergency summons. We are dealing with a repeating electromagnetic signal originating from the subsurface of KX7 Primaris. The signal has a non-random structure. We believe it is artificial. However, our simulations cannot explain the transmission mechanism. The planet's magnetic chaos should make coherent signaling physically impossible. We have run 14 hours of simulations. Yeah, I read the brief on the jump." Mara was already walking toward the display. "You mind if I?" She gestured at the controls. Veyron blinked his outer eyes. "Please." She set her coffee down, pulled up the raw signal data, and looked at it. The room held its breath. 43 scientists who had collectively spent the equivalent of 800 years studying their respective fields watched a single human woman stare at a holographic waveform. 30 seconds passed. 60. At the 90-second mark, Mara Ellison said, "Oh. Oh, that's clever." Veyron took an involuntary step forward. "You see something? You've been trying to model this as a conventional EM transmission, right? Assuming the signal is being projected through the magnetic field?" She didn't wait for an answer. "It's not. It's not fighting the magnetic chaos, it's using it. Look here." Her fingers danced across the display, isolating a specific frequency band. "See this oscillation? You thought it was interference noise. It's not. It's load-bearing. The signal is structured to bounce between geomagnetic anomaly points. The planet's own electromagnetic instability is the transmission infrastructure. Dead silence. Dr. Wraith's Gilfrons went from orange to a stunned pale white. That's it. Commodore Zess stopped. Started again. That should be impossible to engineer deliberately. The magnetic anomaly points on that planet shift constantly due to tectonic activity. Right. Mara zoomed in further. So the signal is also self-correcting. Each burst includes a recalibration sequence that accounts for anomaly drift. Whoever built this designed it to survive inside the chaos, not despite it. She paused. Actually, it's kind of beautiful. Very elegant engineering. You identified this, Veron said slowly, in 90 seconds. Mara shrugged and picked her coffee back up. I spent 4 years doing field research on Karath 4. Geomagnetic hellhole, similar tectonic profile. You learn to read environments like this or you get your equipment fried and then you get eaten by something. The pattern recognition gets embedded. She tapped the side of her head. The Vorith Commodore made a sound that his translator rendered as profound disbelief mixed with reluctant respect. 4 years. On Karath 4. Voluntarily, added Dr. Wraith faintly. It was a great posting, Mara said, with complete sincerity. Professor Veyron looked at his colleagues, at the exhausted faces of 42 brilliant minds who had stared at this problem through the long artificial night of the station and found nothing. Then he looked at the human woman who had walked in with a coffee cup and solved it before finishing her first sip. He had read the reports about humans. Everyone in the consortium had. The Deathworld species. The ones who had evolved on a planet of such relentless, creative hostility that it had essentially built stubbornness and pattern recognition and absurd physical resilience directly into their genome. The ones who didn't have the sense to fear things that should be feared. He had read the reports. He was beginning to understand that reading the reports and seeing it were two entirely different experiences. Can you decode the signal itself? He asked. Give me a few hours and a better processing array than my datapad. She was already working. Also, whoever's making coffee on this station, the beans are actually decent. That surprised me. I will ensure a fresh supply is available, Veyron said. What followed was 3 hours of the most focused collaborative work the station had seen. Mara decoded the signal layer by layer, explaining her methodology in a brisk, practical shorthand that the research team scrambled to keep up with. Not because she was showing off, it became rapidly clear that she simply thought this way, in the direct logic of field survival, and translating it into formal scientific notation was something she did as an afterthought. The signal, when fully decoded, turned out to be a repeating distress beacon. Ancient. Pre-contact era. Left by a civilization that had tried to settle KX-7 Primaris long before the consortium existed. They had failed, ultimately. The planet had beaten them. But they had built something extraordinary in the attempt, a transmission system so ingeniously integrated with the environment's own chaos that it had survived undecoded for 11,000 years, waiting for someone who could read the language of hostile worlds. As the final translation resolved on the display, Professor Veyron found himself standing beside Mara Ellison, both of them looking at the words of a long-dead civilization. Remarkable, he said quietly. They were good engineers, she agreed. I was referring to you, Dr. Ellison. She glanced at him, seemingly surprised. Then she gave a small, genuine smile. I just recognized the logic. Survival environments teach a certain kind of thinking. Honestly, Professor, if you'd grown up somewhere that was actively trying to kill you every day, you'd see it too. Veyron considered his homeworld. Temperate. Stable. Peaceful for 6,000 years. Perhaps, he said, that is precisely why we called you. Mara drained the last of her coffee and looked back at the display, at the ghost words of a civilization that had tried to tame a death world and lost. She looked comfortable. Calm. At home in the problem. So, she said, what's our next move? Because if there's more of their tech down there on the surface, I'm gonna need proper field gear and someone to sign off on an atmospheric descent plan. A beat. Also more coffee. Lot more coffee. Professor Veyron signaled his assistant for the supply requisition. Some problems, he was learning, required 14 hours of simulation and 43 brilliant minds working in concert. And some problems just required the right human, and enough coffee to keep her going. The galaxy had many wonders. Humanity was, increasingly, one of them.